Get a cup, get a cup, get a cup. Hello, hello. Welcome back to another video. I am Fresh Cut Slim, and today we're going to be looking at why 10 million men have given up on work. Now, this is by How Money Works, and I really like How Money Works videos. I reacted to one not that long ago, and it was very interesting. And so we're going to be looking at why 10 million men have given up on work. Now, I don't know if this is like men younger, kind of around my age, or if it's like, obviously it's not going to be retirees, because then the answer is they're retired. Anyway, whatever, with that being said, the original link's in the description. Let's begin.
4 years ago, America and the rest of the world saw its most intense spike in unemployment in recorded history.
Was that from the pandemic?
In today's news cycle, that is ancient history.
Yeah.
But what isn't ignored is what has been left behind. There are now over 10 million people, mostly men in America, who are not working, not studying, not retired, and not institutionalized.
I mean, they closed down the institution, so I don't think that's really an option anymore. But, isn't that called a, frick, there's a word for this. NIST? NAT? Not employed. NEET. I think it's called the NEET.
They are just doing nothing. COVID accelerated this trend, but it's been going on for decades. Since the 1960s, about 0.1% of American men have given up on work to never come back every single month. So why are so many people giving up so consistently?
Well, the bigger question is, how can they afford to do that? You know, it's like all these people, unless they're becoming independently wealthy, like, it doesn't make sense. Like, does this take into consideration them creating their own business or their own jobs? I don't know.
And more importantly, how are these people surviving without a job in this economy?
In October, Mississippi's labor force participation rate was nearly 54%, while the national rate was over 62%.
How many jobs on these two websites?
It's been over 1,000 combined.
They're not working and they're not looking for a job, and those are the folks who we have to get into the labor market.
Why aren't some Americans getting back to work? It's the million-dollar question.
There are a lot of reasons why someone might not participate in the labor force. They might have retired, they might be still studying for qualifications, there might be people who are too sick to work, stay-at-home spouses, members of the military who are clearly working but don't officially count as part of the labor force, and then of course there are just...
That's not counted as part of the labor force? I think it probably should be. And does self-employed count as well? Because you haven't mentioned that.
Really rich people who don't need to work to maintain their lifestyle. These groups have always existed, but there is a new group growing alongside them, which are people who have just given up. The fastest growing group of these labor force dropouts have been men between the ages of 25 and 55. Men in this age range would typically be in the prime of their careers, but more and more of them are not working at all. Now, some of this can simply be explained by the fact that more women have entered the workforce. In fact, up until 2008, women were entering the workforce almost as quickly as men were leaving it. Some men just took on domestic roles as stay-at-home husbands while their wives or partners focus on their careers instead. According to Pew Research, young women are now earning...
I don't know how people, like, in the olden days, you know, in the 50s, it would be kind of like that, where you'd have one person staying at home taking care of the house and the kid, and then the other person at work. But nowadays, to do that is very difficult. Unless you're in a really high-paying job, I don't see that as a wise decision to do, just because financially... You know, for one person to earn enough to support the whole family and a house mortgage, all the bills and everything, that's very rare nowadays.
Significantly more than young men in most major cities in America. Young women are also graduating college at higher rates than men. So it makes sense that a growing group of men are tossing aside typical gender roles and doing work that doesn't get counted as typical employment.
Yeah, but like the graduation thing, it also just goes to show that men have also given up on education, because they'd have just as much option or ability to go to college and get education, you know, if they wanted to as well. And the fact that more women are graduating shows you that they have also seemed to be less interested in further education at the same time. So I don't think you can say all the women graduating from college is what's, you know, a factor here. I think it just goes to show that men have given up on further educating themselves.
If this were the whole story, there would be absolutely nothing wrong with this. But let's be honest. Having a stay-at-home parent, no matter what gender they are, is a luxury that most people simply cannot afford in the modern age.
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't make
especially young
sense.
people who are the fastest growing group of labor force dropouts. There is something more going on here. Nicholas Eberstadt is a political economist who published the book Men Without Work, which tracked the trend of working
This dude's got some weird face tats.
age men simply giving up on work and largely removing themselves from society in the process. His book, which was first published in 2016, lines up perfectly with a 2022 study on the issue conducted by the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, which found that men without a college degree in particular were dropping out of work because their earnings power was significantly lower than their peers who did have a 4-year degree. That's not unusual, because college-educated people should expect to earn more than non-college educated workers on average. But the finding found that
So they're just dropping out instead of going and educating themselves or anything. They're just dropping out and giving up. What are they going? Just living, being homeless? Like there's a huge homeless epidemic in America. So is that what they're doing, or are they just living in the woods? Like what? Like what are they doing? What are they doing to sustain themselves?
the gap between the two groups had widened significantly, especially amongst college-educated versus non-college-educated men. Now, this was particularly surprising to the researchers because it would actually make more sense that higher income workers would drop out of the labor force, because if they are earning a lot of money, they have a better chance of marrying a higher earning spouse or just saving up more money for an early retirement. Instead, they found the opposite. The group that earned less were more likely to drop out of work.
I guess maybe part of the reason here is that they're making so little that they're like, you know, what's the point of even trying? I'm not really making any headway. I'm not getting anywhere. Might as well just give up. That might be some of the logic, I guess.
And yes, before you ask, the study did account for the fact that people not working won't be making an income, so they would automatically be in the non-working low-income group. Now, since men are now overrepresented in non-college graduates, they were the largest group of people giving up on work. But even though it's tempting to make this an entirely gender-specific issue, and to be honest, it would make for a more engaging YouTube video,
What is that supposed to mean?
there are some bigger forces at play here. The reason that people with lower incomes were dropping out was simply because they had less to lose and more to gain. Most unskilled jobs cannot buy you a comfortable lifestyle basically anywhere in America anymore. And as more people tie their identity and social status to their work
More to gain? How are they gaining more? They're definitely not gaining more, roof under their head.
and income, it's become much harder to accept unglamorous service positions. If you were given two options, honestly consider which one you would choose.
Okay.
You could scrape by working a few minimum wage jobs where you are on your feet dealing with customers and managers all day. A job where you are unlikely to advance too far without a degree, and you won't have much time or energy left at the end of the day to pursue side projects. You might also be working a job that you aren't exactly proud to share with your friends, family, or romantic interests. The other option is that you could scrape by on whatever government programs or family support you could find. Maybe work on some side projects in your spare time, or just fill your day with low-cost recreation like playing video games.
Yeah, that's much more appealing to a partner to brag about, Nah, girl, I don't work. I game! Work? What's that? All I know is gaming. So stupid. I've worked in the fast food industry. I've worked in manual labor jobs. I've done a lot. And I don't understand, like, if you're on government assistance or whatever, that's not enough to survive on, really. Even if you're living with your parents, that's not a permanent solution to this issue, I would say, right? The odds of them allowing you to live at their place for the rest of your life until they pass away is very low. And if you are doing that, I think you're a leech to society. You're not contributing. You're just sitting around doing nothing, relying on your parents to fork over money to get you food and to support you when you're just there gaming. I think that's such a leech behavior. And obviously I'm talking about people who have the ability to work. I know there are people who don't and they have to rely on others, and that's a unique situation on its own. The least you could be doing is working at like McDonald's or some place to make some kind of money, and then you can pay your parents some kind of rent or something. So at least it's not as bad of a burden on them.
I would like to think I appreciate the value of a hard day's work, but I have always had the luxury of a prestigious career and successful business. Given these specific options, how would you choose to spend your day? If you are brave enough, go ahead and share it in the comments below, so people on the internet can call you a bootlicker or a lazy zoomer respectively. Now, the second
Leave a comment so others can roast you.
option also has the advantage that if someone asks you what you do for work, you can just tell them that you are working on a new business or taking some time off. The Fed study found that this was one of the biggest reasons people didn't want to take on jobs that they thought were beneath them. Now, no matter what side of the
Ego gets in the way, huh? ego gets in the way. Like, you can take on a part-time job. Like, if you're doing nothing, you can still take on a part-time job and make some kind of money. You know, if you want to work on your side projects, you can do that, but maybe take on a part-time job. Even if you take on a full-time job where you're working 8 hours a day, yeah, that's a lot of time. But there are jobs where you do 12-hour shifts, okay? So if you're working 8 hours a day and not 12 hours, then when you get home, you still have 2 to 4 hours a day extra to put into your side project stuff.
The fence you are on, this issue affects us all. These millions of people are out of work at the same time as we have major issues with worker shortages in our most important industries. And this trend is only going to get worse unless something changes. So it's time to learn.
That would be wages. If there is a huge shortage, logically in a free market, the employers would be raising the wages to try to fill that position. That is how it would work.
How money works to find out how these people are surviving without work and what it means for the rest of the workforce if they never come back. Apart from a few early retirees that made a lot of money at a young age, most of the people who are not working and are not looking for work are living extremely basic lives. Eberstadt's research went beyond the broader demographic studies and focused a lot on trying to figure out what these people were actually doing with their time.
Watering plants.
Now, the next few minutes are going to contain some hard-to-swallow pills. And even though Eberstadt is sometimes a bit direct with the way he lays out the facts, his research and his recommendations address some of the most important issues in our society. He found through national surveys that the average man not in work or looking for work was basically doing what you might expect.
Jorking it.
They were sitting at home, spending a majority of time behind a screen.
I'm about to bust.
Most of them contribute very little to looking after other members of a household, and they were underrepresented in other civic activities like volunteering, even though they had more free time than their peers who worked or studied. He also poked holes in the idea that a lot of these men had just become stay-at-home spouses taking care of chores to support their working partner, a role that was, in the past, typically performed by women. Unfortunately, according to the federal...
Nah, like, I don't freaking buy that. Sure, that happens a bit, but I don't buy that. If you're sitting at home all day, not contributing, not doing anything, I don't see how is that sustainable? How can they do that for the rest of their lives? Like, who's supporting them?
Federal survey data he collated, the average labor force dropout spent an equal amount of time on household care as the average employed woman, and 5 minutes less per day than the average unemployed man, who would theoretically be spending at least some of their time looking for a new job. What they were spending their time on was leisure activities and sleeping. The average person who had dropped out of the labor force was also far less likely to have children or a partner, and Eberstadt theorized that there were 2 reasons for this.
Well, one, it doesn't look good when you're bragging to a woman about being at home playing video games all day. I don't think that's that appealing, you know? It shows no ambition in life.
The first reason was that children, dating, and a family life are expensive
Well, I don't know how many of them want to be children dating.
commitments that people trying to get by without a job just simply wouldn't be able to afford. The second reason was that people with a family to support were inherently more motivated to go out and provide, even if it meant working a job that a single person wouldn't. Of course, this is a large sample size, and there are plenty of people with children who don't work and plenty of couples totally outside of the labor force as well. But even without these typical responsibilities, daily life is still very expensive. Government benefits for people out of work typically only extend to those people who are either actively seeking work or cannot work because of an illness or disability. The exact makeup of these assistance programs varies state to state. And of course, outside of America, different countries have different levels of social welfare. But America is where this trend has been most pronounced, and it's also where a bulk of the research on this trend has been done. So as anybody who has ever tried to apply for government welfare in America will tell you, the burden of proof to qualify for these payments can be exceptionally high, with the only real exception being COVID-era stimulus, where arguably the burden of proof for payments was too low. Saying you need unemployment payments because you would prefer to stay at home all day vaping and playing Fortnite isn't going to fly with Uncle Sam. What Eberstadt did find, though, was that it had become much easier.
Listen, dog, I need my money. You don't understand. I'm playing Fortnite all day. I've never really been on welfare, so I don't know, how difficult it is to actually get on. As, it's mentioned here that it seems like it's quite difficult to get on. So if they're not actually qualifying to get money from the government, to sit at home playing video games, how are they getting any kind of money at all? Are they just solely supported by friends and family?
Easier for people to qualify for disability payments, which in most circumstances do not require recipients to be
They're faking disability?
actively looking for work to maintain their payments. In his own book, he highlights how difficult it was to find consistent data on all of the government programs that might be available to these people. And of course, needlessly pointing the finger at assistance to some of society's most vulnerable people is not the point here. What is, though, is that according to data from the Department of Social Security, annual disability insurance payments have outpaced all other major programs. They provide the data as a table, but here is a nice visual line chart. Dr. Dwight R. Lee, an economist, also proposed that a major element that Eberstadt overlooked was that a lot of these men were working. They were just
Self-employed?
doing it in the underground economy, which was estimated to be contributing about $2 trillion, or about 12% of US GDP.
Underground. So is that like what? Uber? You know, a food delivery service? Is that underground, or is that would be like, or is that self-employed? I don't think self-employed would be underground. You know, where does self-employment come into this? I haven't heard that, I don't think, mentioned at all.
This could include these people doing anything from working in formal cash jobs to skirt tax and minimum wage laws to outright illegal operations like shoplifting or selling drugs. So the work of these researchers paints an image of this growing group of individuals mooching off friends, family, and the government, while wasting their days away playing video games or being an overall burden on society. It's not exactly flattering, but to be fair, there are certainly people living these lives, and with nationwide or even global demographic trends like this, broad strokes need to be made. The researchers studying this trend are actually
I mean, if they're at home all day on the computer, I'm sure some strokes are being made.
highly sympathetic to the situation of these people, and they seem motivated to actually fix the cause of these problems. I will of course be leaving a link to the full book in the video description if you want to read it yourself, as well as some great interviews these men have done that lets them articulate their grim feelings in a way that's a bit more human. The reality is that I can personally see if just a few things went differently in my own life, I could have easily fallen into the same comfortable trap.
See, I think with COVID, you know, I think that so many people got laid off, and that say you're a man, you get laid off, you were working at McDonald's or something, and then all of a sudden you have to come up with some kind of income source without a job. So then you start creating a business, or you start doing a side hustle thing, and you like it and you don't mind it. You wouldn't want to go back to work at, you know, a minimum wage job or whatever if you already have some kind of income coming in through a different source at that point, right? The pandemic lasted a few years. So if you had a few years to work on a side hustle to make it generate you some income, then all of a sudden, like, would you want to go back to the workforce if what you're doing on the side is supporting you? I would say probably not.
Most of you watching could have too, whether you realize it or not. But this still doesn't answer the most important question. Why is this becoming more common? Most people, if given the choice, would prefer a nice stable job with an income that could provide a standard of living beyond basic survival. But yet, more and more people are dropping out of even trying to look for a job every single year. There is unfortunately no single answer as to why people are giving up, but there are some contributing factors. Firstly, competition for good prestigious jobs have become far more fierce, while pay for basic jobs has not kept up with living costs. Technology has made it much easier to isolate
What is this, like an 80-year-old gamer?
oneself from the rest of the world, and there are other broader social issues like the opioid epidemic
He's trying to figure out how to jump.
that at the very least have not helped this trend. One of the most damaging factors has been the insidious myth of the skills shortage, which has led to an economy where millions of people don't have a job, but there are millions of jobs that don't have people to fill them. I am going to be writing an article about how the idea of a skills shortage has been used to undermine the traditional career path of millions of Americans over on my free email newsletter linked in the video description.
I think the jobs where they can't be filled, like all these minimum wage jobs and whatever, which are having issues, the easiest way to fix this is to raise the wage that you're paying. That is the easiest way to fix it. And, you know, I can't feel bad for a business if they go under because they couldn't find employees. But the reason for that is because they just weren't willing to pay enough. I can't feel bad for a business that, you know, that has that issue, because it's a simple solution to fix that problem. Yes, I know that if you do start hiring and you are paying more, then you're going to be paying more to other employees that are already working for you because they're going to want raises and whatever. But that is the main solution to this problem, is to just raise the wage that you're paying people. Because as I mentioned this in another video, if McDonald's all of a sudden started paying $30 an hour, any vacancies in McDonald's are going to be filled really fast because that's a crazy high wage to pay, right? So, you know, there's an easy solution to the problem of businesses not being able to find people to work. And I know some people make the argument that, oh, well, they'll have to raise the price of food or whatever. But if you look at other countries, such as European countries that have a lot higher wage, the prices of burgers and whatnot at McDonald's, they are more, but they're not crazy more. And I think the majority of people would be willing to pay 10 cents more or 20 cents more for a burger if it means that everyone working at the restaurant is getting a livable wage and can afford, to pay their bills. But they just don't want to fork over the money, even though the majority of companies right now, at least, are at record profits. Also, since 2016, McDonald's has raised their prices by around 40%, I believe it is. Now, inflation has not been that high since 2016, and the majority of other restaurants have not raised it that high. So they clearly have enough money they could afford to pay people. Anyway, hope you guys like this video. I enjoyed it, and I really do like these types of videos. They're very interesting to me. Hope you found it enjoyable as well and interesting. And yeah, make sure you go subscribe to How Money Works. And with that being said, I'll see you guys next time.